The year is 1922, and Howard Carter has just discovered the untouched tomb of the boy King Tutankhamen, who would overnight become the face of ancient Egypt. But even though everyone knows who he is, not many know his true story and the possible, albeit fantastic reason his tomb was never touched, because believe it or not, King Tut wasn't the only pharaoh with an untouched tomb, because there is another one that was actually discovered just 15 years earlier in 1907. And it's right around the corner from the boy King. But unlike the boy King, this tomb was completely empty, save for a single sarcophagus whose name had been removed, along with his face, and a single inscription near the entrance that reads, "The evil one who should never live again," leading many to conclude that tomb KV55 is actually the tomb for the Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, aka the Pharaoh Akhenaten, who was easily the most controversial pharaoh to ever rule, because after ruling for only a few short years, out of fucking nowhere, he changes his name, moves the capital, and banishes all gods, except for one disc-shaped object that he called the Aten. And he was King Tut's father, which begs the question, is this just a coincidence that these are the only two tombs left untouched, or is there a deeper connection? But we'll come back to that one, because first I want to talk about this disc-shaped object called the Aten, which scholars will contend is just the sun. But the sun god Ra was one of the gods banished by Akhenaten, and the word Aten, translated, simply means disc, which is an important distinction because even though the god Aten was worshipped before the rule of Akhenaten, it was always in conjunction with the god Ra, as Aten was a piece of Ra. So if Akhenaten was worshipping this particular god, A, he wouldn't have banished the god Ra, and B, he would have called it the Ra Aten, because Ra was the Egyptian word for sun. Now, here's where things get a little trippy, because it is an undeniable fact that the Pharaoh Akhenaten looks completely different from every other pharaoh. Now, whether or not he actually looked that way, or had himself portrayed to look that way in reference to someone who, well, look that way, is unclear. Whatever the case may be, let's just be honest here. The guy could easily be E.T.'s goddamn doppelganger. Which brings me to his children, that of which included the boy King Tutankhamen, who was the eldest. However, his mother is different from Akhenaten's other children, who, like the pharaoh and their mother, the mysterious, yet-to-be-found Queen Nefertiti, they all had elongated skulls. And here's the thing, the right side of Akhenaten's skull was completely bashed in, which was most likely the cause of his death. Now, whether or not it was an accident or intentional is unclear. But, and this is just my theory, I think that motherfucker was taken out, along with his wife and two daughters, because we never hear from them again, just like we never hear from King Tut's mother, which to me suggests, and I know this sounds crazy, she was killed by Akhenaten and replaced by Nefertiti, which would have greatly angered the boy king, giving his visor, Ai, who would eventually become pharaoh, and the high priests, of which had been stripped of their power, just enough edge to push King Tut into seizing power, which ultimately led to everything going back to the way it was. Basically, King Tut was the savior of ancient Egypt. Now, let's go back to the whole untouched tomb thing, because believe it or not, there is another untouched royal tomb located less than 900 miles away within the ancient Sumerian city of Ur for the Sumerian queen Puwabi, and guess what? She also has a really big fucking head, which to me is super intriguing because it begs the question, is this nothing more than a coincidence or a direct result of those they ruled truly believing they were gods, or a direct descendant of said gods, which I totally understand to many is a ridiculous, borderline insane thing to suggest, because the very obvious, sane reason would be Akhenaten's tomb was empty and King Tut was the savior. But ask yourself, would that really stop some piece of shit grave robber 50 or 100 years later? Or is it more likely that fear was the reason? And before you answer, think about this. One of the many artifacts found within the tomb of the boy king was an iron dagger, which, to date, is still unexplainable because King Tut ruled during the Bronze Age and 200 years before the Egyptians were said to have first discovered iron, which only makes this next part that much more mysterious because this is actually meteoric iron, which is beyond insane because meteoric iron isn't just conveniently located into one spot. That shit is spread throughout, so finding it and extracting it is an extremely difficult process, especially for an ancient civilization who who had no idea what in the fuck iron was. And meteoric iron contains a shit ton of nickel, which makes the metal very brittle, far too brittle to fashion. So what do? You fold it over and over and over again until the metal becomes strong enough to fashion, which is a process you can clearly see within the blade, no matter the time period or skill level. Yet, none of that is visible within this iron dagger, meaning this blade was cast in a mold, meaning the iron was heated to well over 3,000 degrees, meaning it would be impossible for anyone to do this for at least another 800 years. Now, all of that being said, I'm not saying the Pharaoh Akhenaten was a god, or an alien for that matter, and I'm not saying that he gave his son this dagger, that of which, literally, came from the stars. And I'm also not saying that this might explain why certain royal tombs were left untouched while others, not so much. But what I am saying is that we have a shit ton of coincidences here that at the very least, maybe, should be taken just a little bit more seriously and, well, further explored. But hey, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. What do you think?